Okay. Okay, can you guys hear me now? I think I had my mic muted. I am so sorry. Hi. Good morning, everybody. This is AKA Heather Joy, and you guys have boarded the lifeboat. And again, I was just showing my little buddy here, Misha. I love this guy. I actually read an article the other day, and I'm trying to remember where I found it, but it said that there was no evidence that emotional support animals actually provided help for people with mental illness. And I just stared at it for a minute. I thought, you got to be kidding. And I thought, surely whoever wrote that article uh, does not suffer from a mental illness of any kind and doesn't have a good relationship with a pet, because I could fertilize my garden for years with that load. I mean, goodness. Anyway, I am sorry. Let's see here. Let me get things set up here. Okay. I just got back from a really early morning treatment, and yeah, I'm just trying to get everything together here. Okay. Got that one. Wait, there we go. Okay, cool. Now, before I get started, I want to run through the rules that we have here very quickly. First of all, please, no politics while you are discussing things in the chat in the comment section. I'll leave that completely to Tommy. Sometimes it's important, but yeah, most of the time that's a little bit too triggering for everybody. So no politics, please. Anyway, the second rule that we have here, this isn't a religious channel. It's fine to say things like, I'm going to pray for you, or I would have never found sobriety without my faith. All of that is fine, but if you begin to tell someone that your God's better than their God or anything overbearing like that, no, please, none of that. Let's see, the third one we have here is, please refrain from cursing in the chat and the comment section. You know, as Tommy always says, if you can't control your mouth, then you can't control your life. And the fourth one, please, no trolls. There is all the room in the world that we need on this boat for people that are here to get help with addiction. But there's no room at all for mean people. You know, we come here to build one another up and to help each other and to share our experiences and try to learn from those things. And there's just no place for meanness at all. So there we go. I would also ask you, if you haven't hit that like button yet, please exit out of the live chat and just go get that little love tap for me. And please share these videos with people that you think could benefit from this. And if you haven't subscribed, oh, please subscribe. Would be awesome. Anyway, I love you guys. Thank you very much. You guys are the best. Let me see who I have got in here. Cat hair flying in my face. He's sitting here in my lap. Okay, this morning we have, well, Charlie, I think, is at a doctor's office appointment at the moment, but he was here. And John Doe, seventh son. Let's see, Valerie 102. Kenito Warrior, good morning and welcome. That's a new name for me. I'm very glad you're here. John, let's see, I already said John Doe. Let's see, the JT's here. 2A is absolute. Tim is here. I love that. Full of hope. Good. Well, I know it's daytime. It's about, I don't know. It's midday where you are in Ireland, I think. Let's see. We have Kelly Gerling is here. Let's see. Goosebump 801. Good morning. And who else? Let's see. Chris, good morning. Your religion is the best. Good for you. All right. I'm surprised that Quiet Girl isn't here. I was hoping she would be. Anyway, well, it's really good to see everybody. And this morning, I'm going to attempt this again to talk about um, your inner child. The last time I prepared something, the more I got into the angle that I had taken, the more I just had a really strong feeling that I shouldn't do it. And the reason is that when you are dealing with your inner child, it can be very, some of those feelings, some of those memories, if you can get in contact with your inner child, they can be pretty intense and overwhelming at times. And so I just didn't want to trigger anybody. And there are some things that really you should, if they're causing you an extreme amount of anxiety, if you're having extreme PTSD symptoms, anything like that, it's a really good idea to do inner child work with the guidance of a therapist, really, because they can guide you through that. And I am not. I've been a psych nurse, but I'm not a counselor. That's not my forte. But I have taught. When I was a psych nurse, I would teach a lot of group classes, and this is kind of like a group class. Anyway, yes, seventh, can you calm that inner child, please? Settle him down. Anyway, I am going to attempt it again. I actually found a lot of the stuff that I had taken the class that I had taught, particularly on the inner child stuff. I actually found some of the notes and the things that I had used from way back when I was a psych nurse, and I'm gonna go along with these. I think this will work out nicely, but it's something that I think is really important to discuss. Let me just pull up my notes here. So, you know, what is your inner child? To me, that's something I've known that concept for quite a while now. When I was 19, 20, the very first time I ever had any kind of psychological help, it was something that we got into rather quickly, was healing my inner child, because I definitely had a lot of work there. And it was a little bit overwhelming at first, but there were a bunch of different exercises that I went through, and different things that I did to kind of get in touch with my inner child, first of all, because now as you're an adult, if you can make a good connection with that inner child, you can actually parent that inner child, and calm things, and it's just part of a healing process. But we'll get to that. But let me back up here, and let's talk about your inner child. When parents have a baby, they that child is completely dependent on the parents, for their physical needs, their emotional needs, their psychological needs, their, I mean, all of your needs. You are responsible. Babies are quite helpless, and that first 7 years is so very important, as far as the patterns of behavior that gets set into your mind at that time. But every child deserves to be safe, to be taken care of, to have their needs met. But we know that that's the ideal situation. And for many of us, we have a lot of wounds to our inner child because of things that have happened in the past. And it's sad. Not every kid has that. Um, it's like I said, it's our parents' responsibility. But if they themselves have been wounded, and they have gone through trauma, very often they're just doing the best they can, and but it can cause issues. And but sometimes it's the parents just don't accept the responsibility. Sometimes people just don't have the capacity to fulfill everything, and that is sad. But it has a lasting effect upon us if there is something that has gone on in our childhood, particularly in that first 7 years, that have made us feel unsafe, or that where we don't trust our caregiver. That can really damage the way that we behave, the way that we engage in relationships, the way that we do things as adults. And addiction is definitely plays a part in that. If you have a lot of childhood trauma, and but when you have this, when you don't have that feeling of safety, for what, or if those needs aren't being met, you end up with a rather gaping wound, in your psyche and in your subconscious. And as adults, a lot of times we become very out of touch with those feelings, with those wounds, with those memories, and we repress them. It's but the thing is that those problems can be rather far reaching, and cause us a lot of difficulty in our adult lives. And so I just want to talk a little bit about hopefully how to kind of reconnect with your inner child, so that you can get a feel for that and see what kind of work you might need to do. Because if you can heal your your inner child, if you can kind of parent that inner child, you know and I was thinking about this today too. you know I think it's a good idea. A lot of us have a very difficult time taking care of ourselves, taking proper care of ourselves. We put everybody else first. And I think a good way to look at your inner child is to consider that child maybe one of your children, someone that you really want to take good care of. Be a parent that way to your inner child. That should make a huge difference. I have told people often that you need to do the things for yourself that you are telling your other friends to do. If a friend comes to you and they're struggling with something, and you give them suggestions or you offer help for them, you want the very best for them. If it's a friend, but if it's a child, if it's one of your children, anything like that, where you need to give that same care, that same concern, that same love to that inner child, and truly take care of yourself. Because if you don't heal those wounds, if you don't take care of that inner child, you're going to continue to have the problems that you find, whether it's anxiety, depression, relationship problems. I mean, it can create a whole host of things. But it's so important that you get in touch with that inner child, so that you can heal those things and have a better quality of life, have better relationships, be able to meet the goals that you want. But it's also a good thing, because when you get in touch with your inner child, it's also a really nice source of creativity, of imagination, of wonder. That's a really good thing. And as adults, we really need that. We really do. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to think about it for a minute. Um, I want you to think about your inner child, and I want you to think about perhaps welcoming that child home. Like I was saying, parenting that inner child, taking care of that. You know, and the way to start with that is, first of all, to just reflect on your childhood. It's a really good idea to make a timeline, to write this down on paper and make a timeline of when you were born, and all the different events, things that went on throughout your childhood. Just making, that's a good start. Just make a line on a piece of paper, and just start putting a mark here, birth. And go back as far as you can remember, and try to start putting important memories on that line. If there were traumatic things that happened in your life, make sure those go in there, just all the different events. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying, but that's a good way to start. And it's a really good idea to focus on your early years, because I know I've told you guys many times, but that first 7 years, so important. That's when patterns, when things are set in your mind and they get into your subconscious, and that's your subconscious, that's the behavior that it runs on. That's how it gets you through your day. And that's, those early years are so important. So that's a good thing is to focus, especially on the early years. um, and a lot of times when you do that, you're going to end up with feelings, with emotions, with memories that start to come up with each of the events that you can think of. And it's a good idea to put the happy and the sad and the bad, and you need to pick it all of that down. But very often, once you get that written down, the memories, the feelings that start to come back, you can kind of see where you need to start, where you might need to do some work. And I remember the first time it was brought up to me, this idea of having an inner child. And at first I just thought, wait, what? It's a little bit of a different way of looking at things, but it really is possible that we still carry this little child within us. It's at you hold that at your core level, and it has a lot of different dimensions, a lot of different facets. We are very multifaceted people. But it's really crucial to get first that connection. That's really your sensitive part of yourself, that inner child. And when we're in connection with our inner child, we feel excitement, we feel invigorated, we're inspired by things in our lives. It feels good. But when we're disconnected, a lot of times when we're in depression, I believe we're really disconnected from our inner child, and you can feel very lethargic or unhappy or sad or bored or even just empty. And when you're feeling like that, that's, as I said, that's when you're not in touch with your inner child. um, there, and everybody is going to be, well, everyone receives different types of hurt as they're growing. It's just something that is going to happen to us. There are things where we feel hurt, or maybe we feel abandoned, or something just traumatizes us, and many times it's very unintentional. It's just, but none of us can avoid that. But here are some of the things. I'm going to read you a list of things that might show you, if any of these resonate with you. It might help you to narrow down what kind of inner child work you need to do. The first one is, do you feel shameful about who you are? I know as an addict, and looking back at all of the things that I have done, the mistakes I've made, the messes I've made, I have a lot of shame for that. But there's also a lot of it when I start to just think of shame in general. It ties to a lot of other things, from childhood, and they all seem to be, um, I don't know, if you've been shamed as a kid, and then you start to feel the shame when you are trying to deal with your addiction and you're in recovery. Um, it seems like the shame just kind of compounded. I don't know if that makes sense, but I really struggled with that one. You feel unlovable or unworthy. I know those feelings very well. Um, are you fearful about the world? One of my lights going weird over here. Huh. Anyway, are you fearful about the world in general? I One of my siblings really struggles with anxiety and fear, just overall, and everything terrifies her. And I it makes me, I feel really bad for the way that she has to live her life, because she does experience so much anxiety and fear. She misses out on a lot of the fun things in life, and I feel bad for her. That's not fun. um, do you have mistrust toward other people? Do you have a difficult time trusting people? That can definitely come from things that happened in your childhood that wounded you. Definitely, maybe you were abandoned, or you just could not trust your parent. for many reasons. That's a very deep wound right there. Have you ever felt unintelligent or ungifted? Or have you felt like you were a burden or that you just weren't wanted by your parents? Those are some very deep scars. I remember my entire childhood feeling like I was a burden. And, those are some very dark, well, along with those come some very dark thoughts, dark feelings. Just, it's, but it's important that you deal with them and that you know, take care of that inner child and try to get those things healed. And it can be done. And this is the things that I listed, that's no way an extensive list. It's just some examples. But when we're children, we're not fully able to process trauma and things that happen to us. And as a child too, we have very sensitive nervous systems, very sensitive, because we're trying to learn and to grow and to develop and to sense things around us and to see the patterns in your family and how things work. So you're very, very sensitive at that time as well. And there are a lot of times where the trauma that has happened to us um, we can dissociate from it. And what that means is that something traumatic has happened to you. That memory is not in your consciousness. It's there in your subconscious, but you don't have a connection to it. I mean, that happens quite often. I Yeah, I've experienced that myself. But what happens, when there's trauma that happens, if you have repressed it, you can't remember it, it's locked in your unconscious, but that energy is still there, and it's something that will be there until you face it and deal with it. And that's just the way it is. It's not fun, it's not a pleasant thing, but those things really do need to be dealt with, or you're going to be constantly stuck in that cycle of addiction. That's really the answer, is to heal the things that caused you to want to self-medicate in the first place. And I was talking about shame just a minute ago, but there's something that they call toxic shame, and it really does become toxic. That's one of the really sad things about having a wounded inner child. You end up with this toxic shame, in many cases. Were you constantly shamed as a kid, or uh, was your personality, were you forced to have to diminish it? Were you ever not allowed to just be yourself? Or did you ever feel like you just weren't good enough? All of those things lead to some toxic shame, and you're going to struggle with that as an adult. um, if you haven't been fully accepted for who you are by your family, and especially your parents, that leaves some very, very deep wounds. If you were chronically bullied, if name calling, if that you were made fun of for something, that can cut very deeply. If you were abused in any way, you're likely to suffer from toxic shame in those cases. And I remember, I think sixth grade for me was probably one of the most difficult times in my life, because there was a lot of stuff that went on in my house already where I did not feel like I was ever enough. I felt like I was a burden. That I felt very unworthy. And when I was 11 years old, at the beginning of that school year, it was the beginning of sixth grade, I was in a horrible accident, and I was on a motorcycle, and I had a helmet on, but I was hit by a feed truck that used the same road that went by our farm. And because of a cornfield, I couldn't see it and I didn't hear it, and the truck didn't see me because of this cornfield, and we just kind of met and we collided somehow. I don't remember much of that at all, but somehow I was caught underneath the truck and I was dragged down this gravel road, and it actually, the collision knocked my helmet off, and I ended up with a very bad head injury. I had, the skin and the flesh ripped off many parts of my body, and I ended up having to have a lot of skin grafting, and I spent a lot of time in the hospital, and this was at the beginning of the school year. And when my helmet was knocked off, it cut my head somehow. I have a big scar that goes around my head, and it had lifted my scalp up. And so they had to shave my hair off, and clean all the gravel and gunk out, and stitch my head back up. And so when I went back to school, my hair was, I don't know, maybe that long all over. And, this for me, I remember sixth grade being the time when I first began to worry about, I mean, really worry about what I looked like, what I wore. Was I something that the opposite sex would be interested in? Am I going to be included with all of my girlfriends and everything that we used to do? And it was an interesting time, because when I was finally able to come back to school, there'd been months and months and months where I hadn't had contact with my friends. And so we I just didn't have as strong a relationship with all of the friends I had used to had. I That didn't come out right, but there were just a few people in my life that wanted to, that came to see me in the hospital and came to see me at home, and people that I could really count on. But I know I was a frightful mess when I went back. The scars on my face were still very raw. It was a really hard time going back to school. I was still on crutches, and I kind of looked like a freak show, honestly. And that was the response that I got the first day I went back, is people kind of, because it wasn't pretty. And it was very, very hard. And because I'd already experienced so many things, from the house that I grew up in, there were so many things that really wounded my inner child. Going back to school and not being accepted with my friends anymore, and being looked at that way, oh, it was difficult. And that was something that took me many, many years to deal with that and to overcome it. But wow, that was not fun. um, and I remember feeling that toxic shame. There was a lot of self-loathing, and it actually started to become kind of part of my identity. That's not good, And I took that to adulthood, and I, yeah, that wasn't fun. But when you experience some of that deep toxic shame, and you really do not like yourself, there are some core beliefs that start to come out of that. And I want to read it. I got a list here. I want to read to you things that you started to believe, that you really believed deep down in your core. Examples would be, I'm bad, I'm unworthy, I'm unlovable. And I remember feeling this one in particular. There is something just deeply wrong with me. I'd always felt that. I wondered, was it I was always trying to be the perfect child, to do everything right, to do, I was really trying to get my parents' attention, and to get some love, and some acceptance, and some, I don't know, there's a lot of things I was looking for. But I did, because I was trying so hard to do everything right, and it wasn't working. I honestly thought there was something just deep inside me that was just very wrong. I remember that very distinctly. That was another one that took me a very long time, a lot of therapy to overcome. Another thing that you might believe is that you are irredeemable, that you are flawed, and that there's no way to fix it. feeling ugly. If you think you're ugly, that was something I really struggled with because of my appearance. And I don't know how this happened, guys, but my husband, this, I'm married, and I've been married for almost 20 years now. But I had been married previously, and because of my addiction, that ended in divorce. But my husband now, I have known him since probably fourth grade. And he was actually my boyfriend in sixth grade. Here I look like a freak show. And this guy still was interested in me and didn't look at my scars, didn't look at my lack of hair and everything. He loved me for who I was. And here I am now married to that guy, and he was one of the few people that when I was recuperating came to visit me. There were only like four of my friends that ever came to see me, and he was really the only one that wasn't repelled by my appearance. I mean, it's just funny I ended up with him again, but yeah, he's a good guy. I got lucky. Anyway, did you ever, do you have you got this core belief that you deserve to be punished? I remember that one. And did you ever feel like you were just a mistake? You know, toxic shame gives you these types of beliefs, and again, these are things you've got to deal with. These are very strong, intense beliefs, and there's a lot of intense emotions associated with them. But toxic shame really very often lies at the very center of a wounded inner child. Let's see. I want to share something that one of the therapists wrote about how it feels. I bring a pain that is chronic, a pain that will not go away. I am the hunter that stalks you night and day, everywhere. I have no boundaries. You try to hide from me, but you cannot, because I live inside you. I make you feel hopeless, like there is no way out. My name is toxic shame. And that was from a book that by Leo Booth, but it was written about that, and I just thought that was very a good description of toxic shame. Um, what? How do kids end up? With getting wounded, with not feeling safe, with how do you end up like this? Um, Before I jump into this next section, I just want to say, I'm not in any way blaming the people that took care of you, if it was parents or family or you know caregivers, if you were um, in a foster kid system, something like that. I'm not blaming your parents or caretakers at all. Please don't take it that way. It's really important to remember that parents really are just doing the best they could. Everybody has a different level of knowledge, of education, of information, and everyone has a different level of emotional maturity. And a lot of times, our inner child becomes wounded because our parents have an inner child that was wounded. And that's very often the case. Um, but here's, a lot of times an inner child feels unsafe, you know. And here's some of let me see if I'm going to read another list of things, and I want you to listen to them and see if there are any on this list that you relate to. Were you taught that it's not okay to have your own opinion? I remember that one distinctly, and that used to make me angrier than anything when I was told how to think and how to feel. Yeah, that one really used to get to me. So, have you ever felt like it's not okay to have your own opinion? Were you ever punished because you tried to speak up about something or you behaved a little differently? Um, were you ever discouraged from having fun or playing? And I know yeah, there's someone in chat I know it knows exactly what this feels like. Um, anyway, were you allowed to be spontaneous? Um, were you allowed to show strong emotions? Whether it was a lot of happiness and laughter and giggling, or were you ever angry but you weren't allowed to show it, or you were very upset about something, but you were told, knock that off, no more booby, no more, behave yourself, and quit being a baby, things like that. I remember hearing a lot of that. That wasn't something that was really acceptable in my house. If we showed strong emotions, good or bad, yeah, that was we were taught very quickly to try to keep that quiet. Let's see, were you shamed by any of your parents or your family members? I remember that very distinctly. Were you verbally criticized or abused on a regular basis? I remember that one very distinctly. Lots of verbal criticism. That wounds and that. I mean, there are some things that you hear as a child. Those words never leave your mind. Those words, wound very deeply. And just this, I thought this was interesting too. I have read many times when I've been studying things of this nature, that the voice, most people have an inner voice, and it will talk to you during the day, where you're doing something, you make a mistake, and you'll start telling yourself, well, that was stupid, and you're dumb, that was, you make derogatory comments about yourself, and you think about those things. Well, that voice in your head, where that is coming from, that's actually how your parents talked to you. That's where that comes from. Anyway, um, back to the list. Were you ever physically punished, or were your physical boundaries violated? Were you ever made to feel responsible for your parents, and you were responsible for their level of happiness? I was. Oh my goodness, I was. Um, were you not given physical affection like hugs and kisses and cuddles? That was something I know I needed a lot more of, and I would be a basket case to this day. I don't think, honestly, I do not think I would be able to do this if it hadn't have been for all the time I spent with my grandmothers, because that was my source of cuddles and hugs and kisses, that kind of affection. And it's something that I need. I crave that to this day. I am a very touchy, lovey, feely, huggy person. That's just the way I am. And like I said, that was something my mother just couldn't give. But and my dad, he just wasn't around most of the time because of his work. But thank goodness for my grandmothers. I the one I have from Australia, she and my grandfather would come and visit a lot, so I had them in our home quite a bit when I was young. But I also live right next door to my maternal grandparents, and yeah, I spent a great deal of time over there, and thank goodness for that, really. um, but the more frequently any of these situations were repeated, the more your inner child felt abandoned or neglected or unsafe. And again, this is not a complete list at all. Um, and if there's something that you can think of, please put it in the comments. And I want to stop here just for a minute and look back at the comments and see what you guys are saying. And Annette, okay, if you think you were a mistake, you were here for a reason. Don't carry that burden. It is. Oh, you nailed that one. That's something I was just going to say in a minute is, it becomes such a heavy burden. And that you are a conscious being having a human experience. I like that. free yourselves from the bondage to hold yourself in. I like that. Very nice. Zenwen, I was always told to shut up, be quiet, or settle down. Yeah, yep. I remember that. Yes, yes, and yes. Always had to clean up any mess and try to keep my parents from fighting. Yes, I I know exactly what you're talking about, Zenwen. Yeah, you were responsible for your parents, honestly, huh? And you had to do all of these things before your mom got home from work. Oh my goodness, I know exactly what you're talking about. It was a burden. It was a lot of pressure. It was you become very hypersensitive to everything around you, because of that. I'm sorry, Cobra. It's a hard show to listen to. Um, you can love yourself more than anyone. It's a hard thing, isn't it? I'm sorry. I know this is probably difficult for a lot of you, and I'm sorry. Um, Full of hope. You're a prickly stick, huh? I'm sorry. You're a very sweet woman, though. You're a very smart woman. Seriously. Let's see. Tim here says, yep, I down myself. No matter what I made sure to down myself because I wasn't good enough. Yeah, those are some very deep feelings. And they carry into childhood, huh? And yeah, full of hope. She's like, yeah, all of the above. I thought so. I thought so. Seventh son says, a fortune teller told me that in 12 years' time, I suffered terrible heartbreak. So to cheer myself up, I bought a puppy. Oh, that's off. Emotional support animals, animals in general. I love them. Let's see. Dominic, good morning, Dominic. I most certainly sheltered my emotions growing up. Yeah. Chris says, oh, your mother was, oh, my first husband used to call them J-dubs, Jehovah's Witnesses. Oh boy, it is sometimes kind of a cult. There are a few, that Jehovah's Witnesses aren't allowed to really associate with people that aren't of their same faith, but there are a few actually here in town that I've gotten to know just because they've come to my house and we've done Bible study together. And that's not my faith, but it was these are some they're very smart, very intelligent, very sweet people. A lot of them. I've heard stories, but the ones that I know are very nice, and I feel kind of bad that they're very limited on some of the things they can do or the people they can be around. It's kind of sad. Full of hope. She says, "Oh boy, Heather knows me." Let's see. Tim here says, "I liked my emotions since I was a kid, and I'm still like that." Yeah, yeah. It's very when you are wounded as a kid like that, it carries on into your adulthood, and it very often affects our relationships, and it leads us to things like addiction. Full of hope. That was very sweet. Open hearts for the unwanted. Yeah, full of hope. Yes, Allison is very correct. You are not a mistake. You really are a miracle. You really are. Trust me, guys. I've been able to talk to her, and she's a miracle. She's a neat lady. Let's see anything else here. Seventh, why are bacteria? What is that? Why are bacteria so bad at math? Because they multiply by dividing. Nice. Very true. Very true. Let's see. Let me see anything else. I don't want to miss anything good here. Coburn, yeah, let it all go. That's the only way forward. Oh, whoops. What did I? Yeah, let me get that out of the way. I hate these little extra buttons that get in the way sometimes. Let's see. Zenwen says here, I was literally a mistake. And you laugh. That's not laughable stuff though. This is sad. Your mom says my mom told me she couldn't have any more children. My sister was 17 and getting ready to move out when my mom found out she was pregnant with me. Wow. Yeah. Um, but I see what you mean about, being a literal mistake. I that's sad when things like that happen because very often, you know, you end up taking the brunt as the child. You end up taking the brunt of that frustration, and I'm sure you know what I'm saying. But let's see, anything else? I don't want to miss anything good here. Let's see. Every day when I come home from work, I always ask my dog how his day has been. When he says the same thing wrong, rough, like that. Okay, let me just see. I don't want to miss anything good here. Let's see, what time have I got here? Oh my goodness, I gotta move. I gotta get back to this article. Okay, okay, there are really three types of emotional neglect that can really wound a child deeply, and these things really do. They can carry these things on into your adulthood. There's the first type is emotional neglect, and that could come in many different ways. Um, but if your parents didn't show interest in your emotional needs, because we all as children, well, we the rest of our lives though we have needs of love, of support, of guidance, of protection. We all need certain degrees of that even as adults. But if you didn't have those things met, if you either weren't paid attention to, or you were condemned, for your expressing emotions, that's likely very much the outcome, that you're going to have low self-worth, poor self-esteem. You begin ignoring your own emotional needs. You learn to hide from or avoid, your emotions, especially the ones that are associated from this type of neglect when you were a child. And a lot of times you develop psychological or physical sicknesses. Very, yes, very often. And I have several autoimmune issues now, and I know it's due to my childhood. Anyway, those are some of the consequences, not all, but some of the consequences of emotional neglect. There's also psychological type of neglect, and this could be manifested in childhood by your parents. If they fail to listen to you, or they don't embrace you, if they don't nurture the person that you are. Every child, I notice this with our children and our grandchildren. Every child is different, and every child has their very unique ways of they have very unique ways they need to be loved and nurtured. And yeah, that's sorry, that's just this touches some very raw emotions sometimes. But as you grow older, if you've experienced that kind of thing, this type of psychological neglect, then as you grow older, you have low self-esteem issues. That can come from a lot of things like the ridicule, put downs, or overly high expectations. Um, but you can have some very deep seated anger issues because of this type of unresolved trauma. Or you might just have the inability to love yourself. Um, Very often with psychological neglect, this kind of thing, you end up with addictions or neuroses, and that create it's very misguided sense of comfort and safety. It is when we use our drug of choice, it provides a level of comfort, but it's very misguided because it ends up leading us to misery, and we all know that. It also makes it very hard to sustain healthy relationships in your life. Now, the third type of neglect would be physical neglect. Um, this would, again, gives you some very low self worth, um, and you might neglect yourself physically, um, or mentally. An example of this would be something like an eating disorder, or you know trying to think of the word. It's not coming to my mind, but people that have food addictions and obesity. I mean, it can come either way, where you're restricting or you're taking in too much. But or just having an unhealthy diet in general, or different forms of self-harm too. um, you might end up with some very intense safety seeking behaviors, like some kind of OCD issues, or psychological complexes. Sometimes this even leads to extreme risk taking behaviors. People that practice unprotected sex, or they are daredevils, like to do things like that. That can come from this from physical neglect. I know that sounds very strange sometimes, but very often that helps. But again, addiction to drugs and alcohol, addictions to food, these are consequences, of that type of neglect, and often to sexual dysfunction or even sexual addiction if the type of abuse that you received was of this nature. Those are some heavy duty things, but I want to. I have a list here, and it is 25 signs that you have a wounded inner child. And I just want to read these off to you. I want you to listen to them and just say, keep in your mind how many times you say yes to these things, okay? Now, the first one on my list here is, in the deepest part of me, I feel that there's something terribly wrong with me. The next one, I experience anxiety whenever thinking about doing something new. The third one, I'm a people pleaser and tend to lack strong identity. The next one, I'm a rebel misfit and I feel more alive when I'm in conflict with other people. The next one, I tend to hoard things and have trouble letting go. I feel guilty standing up for myself. I feel inadequate and not good enough as a man or woman. I'm driven to always be an A plus super achiever. I believe that I'm a terrible sinner and I'm afraid of going to hell. I constantly criticize myself for being inadequate or unworthy. I'm a rigid perfectionist. I have trouble starting or finishing things. I'm ashamed of expressing strong emotions like sadness or anger. Or I rarely get mad, but when I do, I become rageful. I have sex when I don't want to. I'm ashamed of my bodily functions. I spend too much time looking at pornography. I distrust everyone, including myself. I'm an addict or have been addicted to something. I avoid conflict at every possible chance. I am afraid of people and tend to avoid them. I feel more responsible for others than I do for myself. My deepest fear is being abandoned, and I'll do anything to cling to a relationship. And the last one here is I struggle to say no. Now, just think, how many times did you answer yes to things on this list? Now, if you said yes to 10 or more of these statements that I just gave, then, most likely working on your inner child should be at the top of your priority list when it comes to some good self-care. If you answered yes to 5 or more of these, then you really should consider reconnecting with that inner child. But having that a wounded inner child, it, like I said, this affects so much of your life as an adult, and so that's something that you really do want to start to look at. And if you've said yes to a great many of the things on that list, like I said, this is something you really should consider getting help with. And if these wounds that you have are things that you find just so painful that you don't want to think about them, that you don't want to deal with them, it's probably a good idea to get some help with this, some professional help. These things, when you are dealing with them, can be very intense, and the feelings can be so overwhelming that you'll find yourself shutting down. A trained clinician, somebody professional, is trained to guide you through that and help you get through that. And it really is important that you nurture that inner child and you heal those wounds so that you can have success in your life, and you can have successful relationships, and you can feel good about yourself, and you can start to figure out the things that you want to accomplish. You need to take care of that so you can move on and really have a good life. And you guys, I promise you, there's so many of those on that list that I can say yes to, but I've been working for years, years on these inner child wounds. But it is possible to reconnect with your inner child, and it's very possible to heal these wounds and start to figure out who you are, and start to feel okay with who you are. It really is possible. It really is possible to have good relationships again, and to have some very deep, very meaningful relationships in your life. And I promise you, I've been very, very, very rock bottom for a very long time, and I have been able to get out of that. And if I'm just saying, if you guys can, if I can do that, any of you can do that. I'm dead serious. I just want to see who else has popped in since I last looked at the chat, and we've got, let's see, oh boy, there we go. So good morning, Allison and Zenwen, and let's see, Valerie, I think you were here earlier, but JJ and John Doe, and let's see who else snuck in here that I hadn't seen. Dominic was a name I know. Let's see, that I saw. Dominic is here, and let's see. I just want to see if I have missed anybody, but I am Tanya D. Hey, welcome. Oh, wow. Yeah, it says, why do parents, Tanya D says, why do parents feel the need to tell their children they were a mistake? Yeah, that should never happen. That should never, ever happen. That's something that hurts, wounds you to the very core. Wow. But you guys aren't a mistake. If you were told that, if you were made to feel that, that's coming from someone who has been wounded as well. Let's see. Oh, Goddess Divine is here. Good morning. Let's see. If I have missed anyone, I apologize. Let's see. I hope I caught everybody. But here it is, the top of the hour. Wow. I didn't get through everything. I'm gonna have to do a part two on this one again. But you guys, I'm just continuously. Oh, did I say good morning to Tim? I think I did. Anyway, you know, guys, I know these are some very, very deep seated, intense feelings. These wounds, they're very painful, but really they can be dealt with. And I know this isn't easy, you guys. I know that, especially if you are just trying to decide to get sober or you're very new in your sobriety, I know this is hard. I promise you guys that you can do this, and it is worth it. It really is. You guys can do this. I just want you guys all to know that I don't care what your religion is or if you're religious at all. None of my business, but I pray for every single one of you every day. And I want the best for every one of you. And I also just want to say, if you have made comments in some of my videos, or you sent me emails and I haven't gotten back to you yet, I am sorry. I am trying to get caught up. This move, this move was kind of unexpected, but I'm still trying to get my house put together. I've got apricots coming on now, and I was just dealing with cherries. I've got a wedding I'm trying to help my daughter plan. Got grandchildren. I just got so many things going on, but I'm trying. I am really trying to get to everybody, and I just appreciate you guys coming. Oh, Mind Game 60. Good morning. I missed you. Um, but you guys are amazing, coming here in the morning and listening to me. I know this is early, and I know you have lots of things you've got to do too. So I want to thank you for joining me today and for coming, because you're here and you're in participating in chat, and you're building each other up. You're helping each other. It's such a good thing, and that's the purpose of the boat. Is to give a place for you guys to come together and for us to be able to build each other up, to support each other, to there's people that are a little further in their sobriety can offer a lot of help to people that are new. This is just such an amazing place. So again, thank you for joining me this morning, for being here, and for being here to support each other. You guys are the best. You really are. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'm going to have to just do part two tomorrow. So I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. You guys have a great day. We'll see you again really soon.